Anyway, I know Captain Bartlett's on here, so I'm going to tell a story on him. So I think it was day one, or the first evening, I think it was first evening or second evening, he comes to me with a map, and he goes, "Do you know where we are?" And I go, "I haven't got a clue." Well, he wanted me to have a clue because I had a radio, So it's good for the radio guy to have a clue where you are. And he goes, "Why not?" I said, "Well, sir, you forgot to tell me where the insert LZ was." And he goes, "Oh, okay." So then we got on to the map part. And I say one thing, that was the one thing I was actually fairly decent at was map reading, from Boy Scouts. And then when you go to flight training, they give you a lot of top-level map reading, because in those days we didn't have GPSs or anything else for the helicopters. They read regular 1/25,000 maps, just like everybody else. So I had a lot of map reading there, and then I had more when I got into SF. So I was fairly decent on the maps and fairly decent on land navigation. So that really helped me out, especially running recon. Anyway, we ran that mission and came back. Well, I should say this: I carried the KY-38 and the KY-28. That's the thing that you set the frequencies with on that thing for the entire mission, and it never worked one day. And I'm asking Captain Bartlett the entire time, sir, I want to blow this thing up. I want to shoot it full of holes. I want to bury it, No, you got to carry it. And I'm really upset because this thing, it ain't light. So anyway, we get back, and I'm sure that it's one of Captain Bartlett's favorite people, and along with mine was our new company commander that was coming in out of the security company so he could get his CIB. And he's trying to tell me that you cannot DF this. This is why we got to carry it, because you can't use direction finders. I want to say that most people think that the North Vietnamese were rather unsophisticated because they didn't have some of this stuff. Well, they were very sophisticated. Two things that they were very sophisticated at. They were very sophisticated at intelligence. They had some of the best intelligence operations around, second to none. And the second thing they were very good at was anti-aircraft, because they were trained by the Soviets, and they had lots of equipment and they had lots of people. So they had the latest Russian radio direction finding equipment out there. It was very, very good. They also had the little portable ones that was handheld. So they had to have the base stations that were very, very accurate and get the azimuths on you, and then they'd use the handhelds. They could triangulate you pretty close. So you had to be quite careful on that. And so what the KY devices did is what we call spread spectrum. They would take the signal and they'd spread it over a wide frequencies. And what would happen is you couldn't hear what was being transmitted, but you could still use a direction finder on it because it was still transmitting a signal. And I tried to explain that to our new captain, who didn't understand that. So I said, well, I'm out of here. I'm not going to be around explaining stuff to people that has got wood in their head. So I went over to Recon Company, found a team, said, sure, come on over. So I was supposed to go there on a Sunday. Well, Saturday night, they come and got me and said, pack your stuff, you're going up to Quang Tri. And I said, whoa, that's not fun. I'm supposed to go to Recon. Well, a little side note here. Commo guys, right? Recon Company was absolutely stock full of Commo guys. Okay? Commo was everywhere but Commo. Commo hated to be in Commo. So they were in Hatchet Force, they were in Recon Company. Anywhere they could be that it wasn't Commo, that's where they were. Okay? It got so bad that, in fact, when I came back off my last mission, I wanted to go back to Hatchet Force, and they wouldn't let me because they had a directive that said no more Commo guys could be assigned to the Hatchet Force. So they used that on me. Of course, that was Sergeant Major Pillow. He didn't like me anyway. He could have sent me down there. I was secondary with weapons anyway, so he could have sent me there in weapons, but he wasn't going to do anything nice for me. Anyway, so the problem was that there were shorter commo guys. So I got shanghaied, sent up to the launch site, and I was at the launch site for about not quite a week. And after I got there, like 3 or 4 days, I'm on radio watch and I'd fall asleep. I mean, I'd just pass out. Boom. And this happened twice. And then, the things, the chase medic doesn't know what's wrong with me. And the captain isn't amused. So they were talking Article 15 because falling asleep on radio watch is a pretty important thing. You just don't do it. So at that time we had a new chase medic come in. That was Doc Whitmore. So the chase medic went out. Now this guy was a fantastic combat medic. He had gotten a DFC for saving a guy on doing a trichectomy while in the helicopter, doing a trichectomy with his knife, with his Swiss Army knife and a ballpoint pen, saved the guy's life. Just an incredible guy like that. But no experience with the diseases. Okay, I've got malaria. So Doc Whitmore comes in, and Doc is E7. He'd been on the wards for a while and stuff. He was a pretty skookum guy. He'd been around. So Doc comes to me and says, we got a problem here. They're talking about you falling asleep. I said, yeah. He says, how often does this happen? I said, like every 48 hours, come here tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I'll be passed out on the floor. He says, okay, I'll be here. He came in there. There I was. Took me down to the hospital. Temperature's 106, full-blown malaria. So they take me over. I learned something that day. Navy medics and Marine Corps hospitals. You don't want to be in that place. No, it's not a good place. They didn't have a real high regard for SF. So I remember being in this ward. The beds are like a foot apart. I'm so weak I can't go from one bed to the next bed standing up. And I'd get these dry heaves, and the only way I could get outside was crawl. I didn't want to dry heave. I didn't want to heave on the floor. So I'd crawl outside down the stairs, and then the medics would sit there at their desk and just watch me go by. It's like, okay, that's good. So I'm there for like 3 days, and they sent me down to the dang hospital. Well, by the time I got to the dang hospital, it was about half okay because they've been giving me the meds, Now, here's a funny story for you. When I was at Fort Bragg, I got pneumonia. They stick me in the hospital. I had double pneumonia when I came back off of Como FTX. And had a brand new, just graduated second lieutenant nurse who's on the ward. She's about 5'11", big girl, good Midwestern girl, typical German. And she's trying to assert herself in her rank. It's not working well. I'm breaking the rules. I have pneumonia, but I'm smoking, This guy is we have an orderly is trying to get me to do his job by waking me up 5 o'clock in the morning to mop the floors, and I'm turning the lights off and telling him to get lost. And we got an SF medic on the floor later getting his OJT, and he straightened the guy out for me. But I used to call her Lieutenant Butterbar. One time she thinks she's going to get the upper hand on me. She's got to give me a big penicillin shot in my cheeks, right? So she comes in the room with this needle, holding it up, and says, "Drop your drawers." So I did. She fled. So I'm walking down the corridor in Da Nang Hospital, and lo and behold, who should I see? Lieutenant Butterbar walking the other way. And I go, butter bar. And she goes, I came to Vietnam to get away from you. Funny things that happen in war. Anyway, I get out of the hospital. I go back up to the MLT. And they're kind of thinking what they want to do. I got to tell you the one funny thing that happened when I was at the Pung Tree. This was great. So every day we got a package from the 101st Airborne Aviation, usually the Lancers, and I forget the name of the Cobras. And we had two different Cobra groups. One of them was, I think it was a 177th Aerial Rocket Artillery was one that just had nothing but huge amounts of rockets on that thing. And anyway, so they get a new air liaison officer over to 101st Airborne. His job, of course, is coordinate with all the different units he's got to supply stuff to, right? So he calls over the launch site and I answer the phone. And this is Captain so-and-so, and I want to know what you're doing with my planes because, last year you lost 50% of my helicopters and I don't like this, And I go, well, sir, if you had a need to know, they would have briefed you. But because you don't have a need to know, they didn't brief you, and I can't tell you either. I enjoy doing things like that. So the captain decides, well, I'm going to find out where my helicopters are going. So he gets in a Huey, and he follows an insert package. Well, Cubby looks around and said to his lead, didn't we bring 4 helicopters, 4 slicks? And he says, yeah. He says, what's the 5th one doing back there? And he goes, I have no idea. So he calls down to the launch site, who calls down to Saigon. Saigon calls back up to 101st Airborne, commanding general of 101st Airborne, and says, you got a problem, and you need to fix this problem as soon as possible. So they come back, and when the air liaison officer lands on the runway there, the commanding general of 101st Airborne is waiting for him. Well, you know how it is when somebody takes a chunk out of the rear end of a commanding general of the 101st, and you're the captain, things don't go well for you. So I hear this story, and I'm giggling, of course, and about a week later, we had a Cobra go down the AO, and it was a chip detector. It's a metal detection system that's built into their transmissions. If they detect metal chips, they have to make a precautionary landing. So they did. They landed in Laos, precautionary. Slick landed and picked up the 2 pilots, and then called in to us to say, we want to blow it up now. So I called this ALO. Sir, we have a Cobra down in X-ray Delta AO. And the pilots landed. They informed us it was a chip detector light. They're not sure if it's just a sensor malfunction or if there's actually a problem with the transmission. But I'd like your permission to blow it up. And he goes, what? I said, yes, sir. If you just give me your initials, I'm going to blow it up in place. So he gave me his initials, but it was like one of those juicy days, Anyway, I go up to Fuller. We had a radio relay on top of Fuller, and Fuller Fire Support Base was Dong Hao Mountain, and it was just south of the DMZ. So it was a battery of 105s. They had an infantry company up there, and they had a bunch of other miscellaneous people around there. The other miscellaneous was the Army Security Agency Radio Research Unit. They called themselves the Intercept guys. So I remember the first night I'm up there, me and Craig Stevenson, and all of a sudden, man, fire erupts all around this base, and I get my gun, I'm ready to go out the door, and Craig goes, take it easy, it's a mad minute. I go, mad minute? What the heck's a mad minute? He goes, every night just before sundown, they all go out to the bunker line and fire, a couple magazines. And I go, why they do that? Well, in case, Charlie's out there somewhere in the bush, it'll mess things up. And I'm thinking, yeah, they're sitting there, they're mapping all the machine gun positions is what they're doing. Anyway, so we're sitting there, and the only people on top of that mountain that had an idea what we were doing were the Army Security Agency guys. We were the only two groups up there that actually knew what was going on in the world. And this captain that was in charge of this infantry company up there, he thought he knew what was going on in the world. He was Mr. Combat Infantryman. And he said to me one time, well, why are you guys in the Special Forces why aren't you over there on the Ho Chi Minh Trail sneaking and peeking and telling us who's coming down the trail? And I'm thinking, well, guess what? But you can't say anything. So it isn't a couple of days later when we're completely socked in, and there's sensor strings north of us between the DMZ and the border, and they start going off that night, and this guy goes nuts. He has Spooky up there, and they're working out, and somewhere I've got some pictures of that, and they're working out all night long. The next day, 0-0 weather. They're bringing in Chinooks full of ammo. They brought a platoon up to reinforce things, and they're doing all this stuff like, the divisions are going to come running down the DMZ at us. So another day or so, it clears up, and we're sitting there, and we get a runner comes up and says, come down to the landing zone. The battalion commander wants to talk with us. And I go, what in the world do you want to talk to us for, Well, it turns out that the battalion commander had been in Special Forces before, as well as his XO. And so we go down the landing zone. The captain's there, and this colonel's there, and his XO, the major's there. And the colonel says to me, I hear you guys are moving. I said, yes, sir, we are. He said, where are you moving? I said, about 40 kilometers west of here, the Hill 950 out in Quezon. And there way things were, there were no American units west of where we were. So it was like Indian country out there. I think there was, the west would have been Mylock, Camp Carroll, and I don't know if the rock pile had any people on it at the time. Anyway, so he says, so what are you going to have for security? I said, well, we're going to have a platoon of Montagnards. And then he says to me, well, what do you think of this situation here? He's doing this for the captain's sake. And I said, well, sir, if I was sitting on top of this mountain with a battery of 105 and a reinforced rifle company, I'd tell Charlie to come on up because I'd have something for him. Anyway, that was my little payback to the captain in this what are you guys doing thing. So we were waiting for Chinooks to lift us over to Hickory, and we had a scheduled date, and that ended up getting zeroed out because they had some other priority. And the thing about us, when they took us out to Hickory, they couldn't just take the Chinook and take us out there. They had to take 2 Chinooks and 4 Cobra gunships to take us out. So this package comes up. So we call down the launch site and say, hey, permission to leave. And they're telling us, don't bother us. We got a prairie fire. So we go, okay. So I make a command decision. We're leaving. So we tell the choppers, hook us up. We're going, because we've been waiting for a week for this package anyway. So off we go, head over to Hickory. They lift us into Hickory, and what this is a plywood, like a camper that goes on the back of a deuce and a half that normally holds radios. So we'd build a shelf along one end of it. Crosswise we built a shelf at one end, and we had two cots in there, and the shelf we had for the radios. And so that was our commo shack. and you lived in the combo shack. And so we get there, and so it was kind of late in the day. We didn't have time to do much that day. We just basically set it up, set up the radios. And then here's the funny thing. So I called down to, finally they come on the site and wonder what do we want to bother them about. And we said, well, we moved. We're at Hickory now. They said, okay, you can just see the radio. They got sandbags around it, but that's the radio shack there. They're on the right with the radio antennas. So I called down to talk through the Da Nang base and let them know that I moved. So when you do that, you're supposed to use your authenticator. Okay. Well, my authenticator was 13. Everybody had a different authenticator code word. Mine was 13. So I give him authenticator 13. He goes, "Is that you, Brew?" Okay. So that was it. So much for the authenticators. So next morning we wake up and we're sitting there and running the radios, and Stevenson's standing over near the door, and I'm on the radio, and we get hit with one of our own mortars, one Stevenson, and it was an accident, wasn't it, Big O? Big O, I forgive you. I just want you to know that. I'm not sure if Stevenson's over it yet, but I forgive you. But that is one. So anyway, we called for medevac. The medevac pilot come out, and I heard he was on his last week in Vietnam. This guy was incredible. Flew out single ship, no gunships, no nothing, through the Quezon Valley, which was notorious for anti-aircraft. Flies up to the mountain, and we're socked in on top of the hill. I can't see 50 feet. He has me key up the radio. He homes in on the signal, hovers up the mountain, and lands. When he landed, which was not more than 50 feet away, I couldn't see him. And he gets Stevenson, off he goes. These guys are just, salute to all the chopper pilots, man. They're just an amazing group of guys. And I'll tell you later why I was glad I didn't go to finish helicopter school. But anyway, so I was up there for a couple months. Captain Bartlett came up, and because the HF was doing tours up there, they'd come up for a couple weeks at a time. And so I got up there, was we have Runyon and Oliveris. I forget who all was up there when I was up there. I think Fred Camacho was up there too. He was in our company. Anyway, Captain Bart came up. So he comes over one night and he says, ask us to get a hold of the guns down at Camp Carroll. So we get Camp Carroll on the line. And Camp Carroll, if I recall right, they had 8 inchers down there. They're not notoriously accurate, but they have pretty good range. They had about a 40-kilometer fan, if I remember right. So when you 950 the Hickory, you could look down at the Quezon airstrip, and you could also see the hills coming down from the DMZ, 80, 81 north and 81 south, coming out of the DMZ. And there was trucks coming down those hills, and Captain saw the truck park where they're parking. So he called an airstrike, artillery, hit him dead center with the first round. There was a heck of an explosion up there. And so that was a nice accomplishment. There was so much stuff in Quezon. We had a 57 millimeter recoilless rifle up there. And we had some Willie Pete rounds for it. So one day, just for fun, we thought, well, let's see how far we can shoot this thing, So we decided we're going to shoot straight out, see how far it'll go, and then it'll drop, right? And we used Willie Pete because then you could see it hit, So we're firing out towards Quezon, which is west. Thing hits down at the bottom of the hill. We have like 3 secondary explosions within 30 minutes. All kinds of stuff down there. I mean, I think you could almost shoot anywhere in Quezon and hit something. That was a big staging area for them all around that place.